All right, back with you. Cosatu has launched a scathing critique against the North West and Gauteng provincial governments, calling for immediate intervention to address a humanitarian crisis involving the non-payment of salaries for employees at North West Transport Investments, NTI. The federation is demanding that come as more than 1,000 workers face a second consecutive Black Christmas, with reports that some employees have not received their full wages for up to 14 months. Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator, Matthew Parks, joins us now for more on this. Matthew, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. The NTI story, I mean, for me, I think it dates back not even 2 years. It dates back a couple of years, and it seemingly is not getting resolved. Or sometimes there's partial payment, and then the next month there's no payment. What's actually going on? Is there no political will to resolve this matter?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. Seemingly there's no political will to resolve it, at least in the provincial government of North West, which owns this bus company, which must service communities in the North West and Gauteng provinces. This issue has been going on for years and years. There's been countless promises. We've even had meetings as Cosatu with the Minister of Transport, with the provincial governments, with the administrators in the past few weeks. Promises are continuously made by the North West provincial government, but they're not honoured. And you've had, horrific reports of workers not being paid for up to 14 months. We've had tragic reports of about 14 workers having committed suicide over this very long, drawn-out saga. We also received reports that communities in Gauteng, Hammanskraal, which are meant to be serviced by this bus company, are not being taken care of by them, despite the Gauteng provincial government paying the subsidies. So for us, it's a never-ending soap opera. We can't understand for the life of us why. We've had two administrators also fighting each other. So it's been a long, drawn-out soap opera. But the consequence is these workers, many of them are not being paid. Their families are struggling. We're going through Christmas. And, politicians in the North West provincial government are content to be at home, drinking whiskey, we're sure, with their families, etc. But these bus drivers, the mechanics, are just left sitting idle with no money in the pockets. At the very least, the provincial government of North West could have paid them the December salaries while engagements still take place to resolve the longer-term issues, to put the company back on track, etc. So a plea we've engaged with the presidency, with the Minister for Transport, for some sort of national intervention to take place, to put in place some sort of turnaround plan for this company, to make sure workers are paid what is owed to them. But also we suspect there's serious elements of corruption here too as well, because they are receiving subsidies from the two provincial governments every month, significant amounts for about 70 million rand a month.
Right.
And we're not seeing where's that money going to. We're not seeing whether the fares are being collected, etc., etc. And many communities are complaining about not being serviced by the company. So I think for us, the SIU also has to get involved so we can unearth whatever corruption might be there, and that whoever's responsible is also held accountable as well.
I mean, what you're saying is the story that I know. It's not a new story, these allegations of corruption. Because when I would speak to Labour, they would tell me that. I would speak to the business rescue practitioners. They say, well, there's debt of I don't know. I mean, the amount is not clear. But in the millions, others are saying in the billions. Why has that investigation not been done?
I suspect to your earlier question that there's some sort of lack of political will in the North West provincial government, because ultimately they are the custodians of it. This is not a nationally owned company, it's a provincial government-owned company. Gauteng too is also somewhat constrained because they simply provide a subsidy each month to service certain communities in Gauteng. And ultimately one has to say that the North West provincial government just lacks a sense of political will. We fear there might be some elements of corruption, some elements of political underhand playing at hand. Because whilst would you allow this thing to continue and to continue and to continue? And when we've met with the North West provincial government, the administrators, it really has been a sense of defiance, arrogance, etc., and just simply being unashamed to lie. They've made commitments to paying workers, and they're not afraid to break those promises, even during a period like Christmas. So for us, there's something very rotten here. It makes no sense. All the reports paint an alarming bell around it. We know national governments tried many times to intervene and try to sort it out, including from the Treasury side.
Yeah.
But I think from our side, something has got to be done. And that's why we've appealed to the Minister of Transport, to the presidency, to also see if they can't help unlock some sort of long-term and short-term solution to this crisis.
One of the workers, that I spoke to was a little bit more explicit. He would have said that there is a politician, or maybe politicians, who are directly benefiting from this. What is your assessment?
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think given the history of the Northwest province in the past decade or so, this is a province which not so long ago was under administration because it basically collapsed. We wouldn't be surprised at all if there is some politicians in that province involved. But again, that's I think why we need to see, and that's why we appeal to the presidency, to deploy the SIU to go and investigate it, to investigate where the leakage is, whether it's around fares, what's happening to the subsidies from the two provincial governments, why workers' salaries not being paid, why the medical pension funds, the taxes not being paid despite claims by the employer to that effect. And, if there's a hidden hand behind it, yes, we think the SIU is the only kind of real tool which can help unearth those kind of things. Because right now, if we don't change, this is going to continue, and ultimately it is going to collapse at the end of the day. And that's something we just simply can't afford, especially when you have about 1,500 workers' jobs on the line, their families, but also you've got the variety of rural and working class communities and townships who are dependent upon this bus company servicing them as well.
So I spoke also to the Northwest Portfolio Committee on Transport on this, and they were saying there is deliberate sabotage and there's deliberate criminality, blaming this on the BRP. And are you confident in the BRP? Are you confident in the process that the BRP is undertaking?
Look, we would agree with them. There's been 2 administrators deployed to this bus company. They've even taken each other to court at times. We have a bad experience of many of these business rescue practitioners. Often they come with a big promise and they underdeliver. Often they become part of the problem themselves because they tend to feast off of the fees that they collect, and they often try to perpetuate the crisis so they can continue sitting there, almost becoming a bit of a parasitic leech. We don't have anything to tell us that this business rescue practitioner is doing anything better. And the fact that workers are sitting yet again over Christmas unpaid tells us that the administrators themselves are failing. Perhaps it's because of political interference by some local politicians. That could be a case. But if that's the case, then the administrators need to call for help. But right now, what we have not seen is a turnaround plan from the administrator, and hence our call for the president, for the minister to intervene, to really make sure we can finally put this case to rest, put in place a turnaround plan, and make sure that company can fulfill its mandate and that monies go to where they're meant to go, to provide buses, to provide transport, to pay workers, and so forth.
Is it unadvised that because one of the questions that I would have asked them is, well, why are the workers continuing to provide services? Why are they not withholding labor? Because, for months and months, they're not getting paid, but they still keep showing up.
No, look, I think that's partly, I suspect, why you find that the fares themselves are not being collected. I suspect there must be some sort of ad hoc survivalist approach by workers out of desperation that if they're not getting paid, they'll collect the fares. But then again, it just perpetuates the crisis. You need to make sure workers are paid so they can survive. Because workers, when they need to go to work, they must have money for their own transport, for food, for electricity, etc. At the same time, the company is saying, well, they're not collecting fares. So one can put 2 and 2 together. It's probably most likely that the workers are collecting their fares, paying themselves directly, since the employer is failing to pay them. But that's just perpetuating the crisis. You need to have a scenario where you pay the workers what they're due, and also you collect the fares due to the company to enable it to continue its operations. And again, that points to the failure of the administrator. Those are the kind of the basic interventions the administrator should have put into place, and not just simply to rely upon the subsidies from the 2 provincial governments. Because what they're doing is they're kicking the can down the road, and they're perpetuating a crisis which is going to implode at any point.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the legal prescripts, is there something else that Treasury can do other than the fact that they'll say, well, we'll appoint a business rescue practitioner to put this entity under administration?
I think for ourselves, it's maybe 4 things. One is that we're engaging with the workers or members of the Tower affiliate on the options of going to Labour Court to get an interdict to force the employer to pay the salaries. Appeal to the President, the Minister of Transport to intervene, to appoint competent leadership, new administrators to turn things around, to deploy the SIU to unearth all the corruption, etc. Because if you don't cleanse the corruption, we'll continue on this cycle. But also we think the Gauteng provincial government has got a significant stick to force things too. It gives a subsidy of 50 million rand a month on behalf of residents of Hammanskraal and so forth. And if they're not being serviced, then they need to wield that stick. They should not be just simply plodding along. So I think for us, those kind of the 4 sticks we think need to be really pushed forward, because otherwise we're going to have this story facing us in 2026. And I think from our side, the workers have suffered for far too long. And finally, we must find a way to resolve this issue and make sure this bus company is set back on its feet.
But withholding the subsidy, will that not deepen the debt situation?
Look, it would force it to come to a head. But also Gauteng provincial government will find itself into difficult legal territory if it's found by the Auditor General to be paying for services not receiving. Because in the Auditing Amendment Act of 2018, if memory serves me right, any official who pays for a product and is found to be wasteful expenditure, is found to be corruption, whatever the case might be, but you paid for a good, you didn't receive that good, you can be held personally liable as well. So an HUD for transport in Gauteng, for example, could find themselves into very deep, murky water if they continue to just give a subsidy to a company which refuses to provide that service. But I think for us, this is not a normal conversation. In a normal scenario, you would simply have a discussion around a coffee table, find what is the solution. We've had these discussions. This crisis has been going for years, and hence our calls that we really need to say, how do we finally unlock all stops to make sure we put in place a turnaround plan. And I think one of the sticks for us right now, if the North West provincial government is not willing to play ball, is for the Gauteng government to exercise its power and to force a turnaround situation to happen.
Matthew, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much for coming on. Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator there, Matthew Parks, on the call for government to put more pressure on NTI to pay workers who some have gone for 14 months without their salaries, another Christmas that they've had to face without their salaries being paid. Well, of course, this entity has been under administration twice now, practitioners being deployed there.